Predator 2 was directed by Stephen Hopkins. He had just come off of Nightmare on Elm Street 5, and the studio was impressed, so they gave him this gig. It starred Danny Glover, and what if I just left him here for like the whole video? No. This film took the Predator to Los Angeles in 1997, 7 years in the future when the film came out. The city is in the midst of a terrible gang war, and Danny Glover finds himself a very angry policeman once again, a character he knows very well, trying to end this war while also solving a mystery about why so many of these guys end up strung up on their feet, naked with their spines ripped out. I've wanted to talk about Predator 2 for a while. The first film is one of my all-time favorite movies. Holy shit, Predator is so good. I watch it every year. Predator 2 is nowhere near as good as the first film. It's a major step down in virtually every way. That being said, the film has a bad reputation that I don't really think it deserves. Predator 2 is often viewed as a bad movie. And for many years as a kid, I kind of thought it was a bad movie. But something happened over the past 15 years in Hollywood. Movies started sucking. Of course I'm kidding, but there is some truth to what I'm trying to say, and that is that the past 15 years or so, Hollywood has become obsessed with remaking the 80s and the 90s. Whatever it was that we had in film at that time, Hollywood is trying to recreate it. Whether it's an endless line of horror remakes that nobody wanted, or franchise restarters that feel like they're trying to capture the magic of their former years while forgetting to tell a new story. Predator 2 did not do that. Sure, there's a predator hunting people, that's kind of what they do, but it's in a different location, it's in the middle of a gang war, there's brand new characters as well, and although the film isn't as good as the first, it definitely was not a retread. I said all of that to say that over the years, I have gained an appreciation for Predator 2 that I didn't used to have. It feels like a continuation. It doesn't just feel like they tried to make another Predator, which is exactly what Robert Rodriguez tried to do with Predators, which we'll talk about soon. The opening sequence of this movie, I have no problem saying, is fucking awesome. Immediately, you are thrown into the shit. There's multiple gangs that are at war with the police, everyone's killing each other, Danny Glover is hanging outside of a car, dudes are throwing cocaine in their faces and getting hyped up and ready to kill, and the fucking Predator shows up to massacre everybody. This is how you open a goddamn movie. Predator 2 has a great opening scene. Something I love about this opening scene is when Danny Glover and his guys are going into the building expecting to encounter a bunch of these gang members, you can hear the Predator tear through all of them and they're screaming. It really sets up some anticipation for whatever it is they're dealing with. And obviously we know what Predator is, but for these cops, they're like, who the fuck is this guy that is doing all of this? Because they're trying to stop a gang war. They don't give a shit about some alien creature. And that's what I love about the way they set up this movie. I really like the plot of Predator 2. I think it could have been directed better, and I think the script could have been a lot tighter, especially in the middle, during the second act. I mean, Bill Paxton's even in the movie in a terrible suit, telling horrible jokes throughout the whole film. I just love the idea that a lot of this movie is about the cops trying to stop a drug war, and the Predator does not give a shit. He's just showing up whenever like people are torturing people or there's a shootout. Predator doesn't give a shit. He just shows up and kills everybody. Where the movie really struggles is its second act, during the middle mostly. There's a lot of scenes that just drag. The investigation element where Danny Glover is trying to figure out exactly what's going on, going to visit people in alleyways, and all of it feels sort of messy. It doesn't really feel as tight as it could be. It's nowhere near as suspenseful as that first film. McTiernan's first movie is essentially a flawless action sci-fi classic. I love that film so much, and you can't really pinpoint a real flaw with that movie. This movie's got a lot of them. And most of them are during this second act where we're supposed to care about these people that Danny Glover is losing to this creature, and you just don't, because they're not really set up that well. There's a camaraderie amongst them that I like, particularly him and his friend Danny, but other people are just kind of there. So you don't really feel those deaths. They don't really feel that important. They just kind of feel like baggage. There's also definitely some aspects of Predator 2 that are corny. You would think Predator would be a lot cornier with all these muscly men and their ropes pulling down trees and shit, but it's just awesome. This movie can get a bit cheesy. And it just wouldn't really be an action movie from this time period without Gary Busey.
He's on safari. Lions, the tigers, the bears. Oh my.
They put Gary Busey in a lot of stuff back then. Point Break, Lethal Weapon, Predator 2. Gary Busey showed up in a lot of places for a while. Where the film really picks up for me is its final half. Once Glover understands what's going on, Busey leads him into their little computer center and Adam Baldwin is there. And he tells him, we know everything about this thing. It can cloak itself. It's invisible. Here's footage of it. Now Glover knows exactly what he's dealing with and he does not give a shit anymore. He loads up on weapons, goes into this meat plant while they're trying to camouflage themselves from Predator's infrared vision, similar to the way Arnie used mud in the first film. The difference being here, it doesn't work. The Predator switches between different viewing modes and is like, oh shit, there's people here. And he starts tearing ass through all these guys, and now it's just Danny Glover versus the Predator. And that's all I needed. Back in the 90s, you tell me Danny Glover's gonna fight the Predator, that's the most exciting fucking thing like ever. Danny Glover was the fucking shit in the 90s, man. Angels in the outfield. Angels in the outfield. They do a lot of fun things with this finale because in the beginning you have Glover afraid of heights when he's on that building, and now he's got to climb down this pipe while the Predator is in some old lady's bathroom dealing with its chopped off arm and bullets to the chest, which eventually brings us to Glover actually fighting the Predator on his ship. This whole sequence is actually pretty underrated. It could be a little bloodier, but it's still a lot of fun. And I love this set too. We get that moment of relief when Glover defeats the Predator until he looks around and a bunch of them are coming out and he's like, well, fuck my life. But one of them gives him an old gun from 1715, sort of like a sign of respect, probably a token that it took off of a kill back in the day, and they just let him go. It's sort of like, all right, you beat him, you won, bye, get you next time. But I skipped over probably the best part of the scene because I really want to talk about it. That's the reveal of the xenomorph skull in the ship. Possibly like the greatest fanboy moment ever back in 1990. I mean, that was like an acknowledgement of the Alien vs. Predator comics. It was easy to get the rights to this thing because they're both Fox movies. And it was just sort of like, hey, yeah, that's real. And that was just really exciting for a kid back then to see that and like have that acknowledged. Speaking of that gun from 1715, the writers of this movie actually had a pitch for a Predator movie that took place around that time. So you could see that story play out. A Predator film without modern technology to see how people back then would deal with something like that. That's fascinating to me. That sounds really exciting. I wish that we got a film like that. It also just sounds totally different. Again, that would have been like a third Predator film that actually tried to do something different. But they were more concerned about putting some people in a jungle and have the predators hunting them again, which is what we got in Predators, which I'll talk about next. But for now, I'm going to give Predator 2 a B-. For a while, I said this was a guilty pleasure, but honestly, I just enjoy this movie. It comes from a different era. In the 90s, it seemed kind of bad. Honestly, though, now it's kind of aged better than a lot of films. It feels like real things are happening in the movie. It doesn't feel like the stunts are terrible. It just... There's something missing from action movies today that even some of the more mediocre films from the 90s just did so much better. So stay tuned for my review of Predators, that being the last Predator film that I've never reviewed. That should be coming out very soon. Guys, thank you so much, as always, for watching, and if you like this, you can click right here and get Stuckmanized.